Okay, I want to cover a lot of ground. Kevin, would you like to teach us quickly, but
Yes, I'll give a brief idea. So, in these recent Parshiot talks, it discusses all the Makkot, all the plagues, which eventually uh, got the got Pharaoh to agree to let our people go. And the one plague this week is about the plague of the frogs. And the frogs are amphibians, and they're cold-blooded creatures, and they went into the ovens and into hot uh, situations, and that they went against their nature. The teachings I've heard a different shiurim. Actually, the frogs went there, went Mesirat Nefesh, and they actually served Hashem. They jumped into. They don't want to go into. They didn't want. They don't want to go into very hot places. They can't. They can't handle it, but they did it in order to sacrifice for Hashem. So it's a lesson that people say, and I mean, it's a lifetime work that one has to always keep Hashem's will in mind in our lives, or when trying to do our day-to-day activities or day-to-day living. We have to try keep that in mind. And the frogs went totally against their nature and against their makeup, so to speak, and for Mesirat Nefesh, to do the will of Hashem.
good. Very, very good. We learned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego decided to go in the burning fiery furnace
Yeah.
against Nebuchadnezzar, and they learned this from the frogs, that even if the frogs could do it, so too they could also do it. And it was in the book of Daniel, which Lance was learning. Do you remember, Lance?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Life
Um,
lessons from books.
yeah. So,
So even though they croaked, it was for a higher purpose.
yeah, I was waiting for that drum roll, please.
Uh,
All right, so let's get started. All mute yourselves. I want to get this thing knocked out as quickly as possible. So, if you have a look, that the Gemara did not agree with Ulla that you can use the defamer as a comparison for a two-part penalty of lashes and financial payment of 100 silver shekel pieces as well as lashes, because this is a case of unusual severity. The husband, instead of granting his wife a ketubah, was going to have her put to death, and therefore it's not a proof necessarily um, for Rabbi Meir with regards to a two penalty solution, but that's less of a problem because he's using the pasuk about bearing false testimony as well as Adim Zomimim, which are two different pasukim, which is unlike the defamer, which is one pasuk, technically. I suppose you could use two, but the major problem is we are saying because of the severity of this law, it basically means you can't necessarily learn that you get punished for a non-action for just defamatory speech because quite simply it's a particularly stringent case. And then having the Gemara reject Ulla's explanation, there's another explanation for Rav Yehuda's opinion that one receives lashes even for a prohibition that involves no action. So in other words, Reish Lakish put forward this fact of Zomimim witnesses. It says, just as the Zomimim witnesses receive lashes for violating a prohibition which does not involve an action, only speech, so too a person receives lashes for any prohibition whose violation does not involve an action. So the default position with Adim Zomimim is a reciprocal penalty. When that doesn't apply as a default for some reason, we give them lashes. And again, the Gemara asks the question and says you can't make this comparison with Zomamim witnesses because there's this particular stringency where there's no prior warning before we give the Eidim Zomamim lashes. Generally, what we learn in Sanhedrin is any corporal punishment or death penalty punishment, he must be warned by the witnesses that what he is doing is forbidden and subject to a particular penalty. Okay, we even learned it last night with Simcha Steinhaus. So the fact that this doesn't have that forewarning makes it quite stringent, and therefore, because of the stringencies, we don't know if a person can receive lashes for any prohibition which does not involve an action. So the Gemara is saying, look, what we have to do in this particular case is you use the law of the defamer, and that'll prove that lashes for a prohibition involving no action is not limited to sins for which the offender is punished even without a warning. In other words, the defamer gets a warning. So that is a contrary argument to Eidim Zomamim. Because the defamer, as we know, needs to be warned. And then the reasoning resumes, the Zomamim has a particular leniency, like most laws, where there's either lashes or payment or reciprocal death penalty, default position lashes, and therefore we can learn from that more relaxed case that there is a consequence for a non-action testimony of even though it's not the law of muzzling one's animals. So in other words, you use the law of the defamer and you use the law of Eidim Zomamim, and you say the nature of this is not like that, and vice versa. So therefore, each one has a stringency, but because they don't share the same stringency, then they don't cancel each other out. Because if they shared the same stringency, and they had this issue where you had lashes for non-verbal transgression, such as defamatory speech, we could say it might be the nature of the stringency that they have in common. That also means in these cases, defamatory speech is treated as if it's an action, but they don't share the same stringencies in the same cases. So therefore, we look at the common characteristic, which is a tzad hashaveh, and we say, look, there are other cases where there is no action and merely speech, and therefore a person can receive lashes from it. And the Gemara says, look, there is another common characteristic that each is a fine. And if both cases are the case of a penalty, a fine, a knas, we can't apply them to the laws where it's compensation. Okay? So in other words, whenever there's a penalty of lashes, which is seen, for example, as compensatory in nature, in that particular case, where they were intending to lash the innocent defendant and they were caught up by a second set of witnesses, it's a problem. Why? Because there's some rabbinical opinions that don't see it like Rabbi Akiva, and merely what is done to them is what they intended to do to their victim in the verdict period, which is measure for measure, which is a compensatory penalty that measures. Remember, a fine is a fixed amount. It also goes away if you by your own admittance, and also it doesn't match the damages caused. So the Gemara said, look, you don't have to worry about this difficulty because Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold Rabbi Akiva's view. You must remember that Rabbi Meir held Rabbi Akiva's view that Eidim Zomamim were a fine, but all opinions agree that the defame is a fine. So if you have a case study where there's lashes for a non-action and one case is a fine, and one's compensation in nature, mammon, then you can extrapolate that when either a fine-based occurrence occurs or a compensatory case occurs, you can apply it because Rabbi Yehuda views Eidim Zomamim as a monetary compensation. So the Gemara now says, look, there is one other reason why you might not be able to derive prohibitions from them. Because the Gemara says, look, what comparison can be made to the common characteristic between them when they share another common characteristic? In other words, if you look at a case of Adam Zomamim and you look at a case of the defamer, each one has an unusual stringency. Each one has its own unusual stringency. So I just want to ask you guys' opinion. What would you say to that? What would be a decent counter argument before we go on? Anybody? Guys?
Not a good day for me. Somebody else, maybe. I can't.
Gavin, what
I'm
are we
just,
asking here?
I don't know. I'm just trying to absorb what you're saying. Sorry.
Okay,
The
so
different stringencies between the defamer and Edim Zimmerman. Is that why there's
well,
a distinction, you're saying? Or
Kevin
they said that.
Kevin answered correctly in that one of the reasons the Gemara doesn't have a problem is quite simply that Rabbi Yehuda said there's no refutation of an unusual stringency because the unique stringency of each law is not present in the other. Because the stringency of not getting prior warning to be lashed from Adam Zomamim doesn't occur in the case of the defamer, and there is a warning. And because payment and money, according to the rabbis, not Rabbi Meir, is that you don't get punished for bearing false witness and for doing to him what he intended to do to his brothers, and that's its own unique stringency, then that's not a reason not to learn case studies. So in other words, if they were both fines, there's a problem because you wouldn't be able to learn a compensation case from a fine case because it's not applicable. And also, if each of them shared the stringency, we could say, look, they both are fines, they both have the same stringency. Therefore, in those cases, there's no Makkos lashes for a non-action. But because they each have the unique own stringencies, they're not shared by the other case. And the one considers it compensatory with Adam Zomimim, and the other opinion considers it a fine. And the fact that in their particular case, you can learn the one from the other. We take a common characteristic and say that for that non-action, in fact, there is lashes involved. So we don't have any problem. Any questions before we go on to something else? The rest of the Gemara. Can we go on? Guys, can we go on? It's pretty clear. All right. So we have to return to the original dispute in the Mishnah. And as for the rabbis who state in the Mishnah that Zomimim witnesses do not receive lashes when they receive a reciprocal hazama penalty, what do they derive from the verse of "You shall not bear false witness against your fellow man"? So again, the rabbis don't disagree with the default penalty when you can't apply the reciprocal punishment of lashes, but what they're saying is you can't get lashes and pay. So what do they do with, because it uses this word harishato, a single wickedness, so you can't get two different penalties. And then because it says you shall do to him was what he intended to do to his brother, in a case of when you say your fellow Jew committed a negative commandment and you want him to get lashed and their witnesses against you, you suffer that. Same with death penalty, same with monetary compensation. But they want to know what the rabbis do with this verse, "You shall not bear false witness against your fellow man," which is in Shemot chapter 20, verse 13. So they say, look, you actually need that verse because you have to have a basic warning to Zomimim witnesses. Because the result of it is the rabbis are argued against, saying, look, you don't have any precedent for a warning. And if you want to say you want to apply lashes to another particular case of a non-action, you need to say that there is some source of warning because it doesn't appear in Adam Zomimim. So then why can't you use that "you shall not bear false witness against your fellow man"? Because you'd have to give him two punishments, and we don't do that. But we say that "thou shalt not bear false witnessism" is the major category against the Adam Zomimim, which falls into that. In other words, although it's a different pasuk, it says, look, there's testimony, which is a non-action, and that shall serve as the basic warning. So since the Torah does not impose a punishment without a scriptural warning that a deed is forbidden, because we've always learned that for lashes, warning is required. So in this particular case, and that's for an action-based negative commandment, we would need that stringency with regards to a non-action, and it's there, thou shalt not bear false witness. So the question then is, if Rabbi Meir, who imposes lashes as a punishment for the sin of false testimony, in addition to the reciprocal penalty, where does he derive the warning to Zomim witnesses for their reciprocal penalty? In other words, he can't derive it from that injunction, because if he did, there would be no separate lashes for violating the injunction. In other words, the punishment has to precede a warning. So although you're saying it's a unique feature of this case, there has to be some sort of warning in general. So according to Rav Yirmiyah, he derives it from the pasuk in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 20, which is after thou shalt not do to what you intend to do to your brother is done to you. So the one verse afterwards says, and all who remain shall hear and fear, and they shall not continue to do further this evil thing in their midst. So basically what we're saying is the entire warning for Adam Zomim occurs a few lines later. And therefore that would suffice to answer Rabbi Meir's warning prior to lashes, according to Rav Yirmiyah. And then the Gemara says, well, okay, why do you need to use that verse? Because according to them, you're not required for the basic prohibition against Zomim witnesses, because we already said they use this discourse, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So what do they use this term, you shall hear and fear that they not continue to do further this evil in their midst? So they say, look, there's this principle of proclamation. In other words, whenever there's a punishment meted out by the courts, we stone in public, we lash in public, and this is a heck of a deterrent. It's not like when you see Oliver Twist, they were handing out popcorn and drinks and taking the whole family out for a good outing to see the local slob end his days. We're a little bit kinder than that, but it's certainly that proclamation of a public punishment obviously serves as a warning to others. And Rabbi Meir derives this principle of proclamation from the pasuk. He says you don't have to see it. You can just use that pasuk and you shall hear and you shall fear. So he said you just have to read on from the Adam Zomim a few lines further. Okay. Now, we've got a new Mishnah to do and a new Gemara. So I just want to see if I can share the screen.
Can I just ask a question, Damon?
Yeah, of course.
You said people must be warned against defaming, and aliens must be warned. Warned after they've done it for the first time, or warned before they even do it for the first time? Have they done it before? Or
no, so what we're saying is it's not about the defamer. Adam Zomimim is particularly stringent because, unlike the defamer that is warned before he brings testimony against his wife, to say that if you do this and you get caught out, there's going to be 100 silver shekel pieces and you're going to get 39 lashes if you're in good health. So in that particular case, he can see whether he proceeds against his wife with this false testimony. When it comes to Adam Zomimim, the reason why there's no official warning, and it's quite stringent for them, is they wanted to corrupt the justice system and put an innocent man to be punished. And therefore, it doesn't actually even require a warning. But the Gemara says, well, you've got a problem, because according to the rabbis, they say that you would need some sort of a warning before you implement lashes. And where do they get it from? And they get it from this, thou shalt not bear false witness. And then you can say, okay, that's reasonable. We don't punish twice, but it's certainly a warning against lashes as a default position, not for the hazama penalty, the reciprocal penalty, because that's from Devarim chapter 19, verse 19, you shall do to him as he intended to do to his brother. But when you can't apply the reciprocal penalty, thou shalt not bear false witness is the prototypical category for a non-action that there shall be a lashing. So we then say, sorry about the snake with fur. We then say, as regards the Rabbi Meir, since he uses thou shalt not be false witness to give lashes, and says in the case in the Mishnah when they accuse the defendant of having stolen 200 zuz, they make payment. Ulla uses that as a defense for that you can have for a non-action multiple punishments, both lashes and payment, and also says for a non-action that there are lashes applicable. But then the question the Gemara asked, Kevin, is, well, then Rabbi Meir, can't you not use false witness to punish somebody because they need a warning? So we learned in Sanhedrin, before somebody gets the death penalty or before somebody gets lashed, they need a warning. So where does Rabbi Meir get it from? That pasuk in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 20, just immediately after that, where it says, he shall fear and hear, and you shall not have this evil in your midst, to basically say, well, that's the warning. That why do you know it's a warning? Because if somebody says you should fear, there's obviously repercussion. There's repercussion for that non-action. And then we say, okay, so that's all very well and good, but then what do the rabbis do with that verse? And they say they don't need it, because whichever way you look at it, if you go to this public proclamation after a court and saying, hear ye, before this a person's going to get lashed to pieces or given the death penalty, this is what happens to a person that commits such an act. The court case verdict serves as a warning itself, but the court within the court process generally does it. But if you've never heard it before and there's Eidim Zomimim, from a court case, somebody would say, such and such, people talk. This one bought a new BMW, that one got lashed within an inch of his life. It's all part of proclamation. Okay. So I think we can, I can see you all feeling a little out of it. Should we end off at this point after questions? I'm happy to. Lance, you're not just stretching your fingers. I can't hear you.
Okay, something you touched on very briefly was that if you have to warn somebody, you must warn them with what punishment they're going to receive. Which sort of means that you need to know the halakha quite well before you can warn somebody. Because you don't know if it's going to be a lashing or if it's going to be monetary compensation.
So this is what I actually discussed with Rav Simcha Steinhauer last night in Makkos. He didn't seem particularly concerned, but it's found in ATB in Sanhedrin, because you've got this case of Rav Yirmiyeh, who basically said that at the end of the day, you have to, it's taught in a brisa that those who are liable for the various death penalties stated in the Torah, the court executes them only when there's certain elements present. In other words, you've got a congregation represented by the court, witnesses, and for warning just before the defendant commits a transgression. In other words, he has to be warned that it's a transgression and what the penalty is. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, the defendant isn't executed unless the witnesses inform the defendant which form of death penalty is to be executed, but they don't all agree. Okay? Because the first Tana in Sanhedrin ADB says, look, you've got to look at Numbers, which is Bab Midbar, chapter 15, verse 32 to 36. And it says, look, if you look at this incident of Slavchad, the wood gatherer, who was executed, even though Moshe did not know which death penalty was to be executed, clearly the mode of execution could not have been included in his forewarning. So So according to Rav Yehuda, listen, that was a once in a lifetime exception, and according to the ton of the brisa, you just need to say the person gets the death penalty. You don't have to be specific. So that's the argument in Sanhedrin. I thought I'd bring it up now, Gavin. That's why you sent it, because Lance would ask it. You remember last night I asked it to Rav
No,
Simcha?
no, but I remember us doing it in Sanhedrin. Actually, that part I actually remember as well.
Because Sean turned
So,
around with a question last night and said, but surely you need Hazroah, which is a forewarning. And my question to Rav Simcha is, do you need a forewarning on that specific punishment for that specific death penalty crime of what sort of death penalty, or just a warning of that it's forbidden? If he does it, he's got to acknowledge the warning, and you can just state there's a death penalty without being specific, depending if you're holding by Rabbi Yehuda or the first ton of the brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to be specific. The first ton of the brisa says we learn this rule from Slavchat that you don't have to be.
You know
Okay.
what?
When you
You
say
know what being specific is also problematic. Is if a guy's like semi-learned and he gets it wrong, then the guy can say, listen, he told me that my death was going to be that, and instead it's that, and that's to be a loophole to get out of it. So it's better to be good,
correct.
generic.
Correct. So what Gavin's saying is, unless you commit a sin by the base midrash, you're pretty free to go. But in reality, it's not quite that like that, because they give people the barley treatment. Brendan, do you know what the barley treatment is? Lance, Kevin,
what is like a whiskey or what?
No, it's not
Uh,
basic.
no, they
barley as in Indonesia or barley as in the grain?
they would probably do this in Indonesia. They're not the kindest people. So what they do is they basically let your stomach shrink, and they give you eventually like raw barley, and they make you drink a lot of water because you're in a cage. There's nothing you can do.
Oi.
Eventually, you're going to get thirsty, and your stomach bursts. So it's indirect. The barley's doing it, not them. But either way, you're going to croak.
Yeah,
Maybe it's the
we always thought, when Shane, when
Ian Shapiro was alive.
Ian Shapiro was alive, we kept saying that, yeah, you'll get away with it in this world, but not the next. You actually don't get it away with it in this world either. You might not get the death penalty. Fair enough. In fact, they say once in 75 years. That was like what's it called? If the Sanhedrin gave a death penalty, they were like what's it called, like savages type of thing. So you can see that a lot of death penalties, the actual death penalty wasn't given, but they still put these people to death. No one actually got away with it. If there was substantive evidence, even if there wasn't a warning, if there were witnesses, you still got the body treatment, in which case you died no matter what. You just didn't get the death penalty. We always thought that you did, that you actually got away with it. Which I'm kind of surprised. We never really touched it on Sanhedrin, unless I wasn't listening, bro.
No, Ian didn't even understand that. Neither did I. Neither did you. We all thought you'd get a. No, I don't think at one point Rav Simcha Stein turned around and said you're getting the barley treatment.
Yeah, it was a completely new concept to me when you raised it, and I was just kind of relieved because I always thought, yeah, these guys are getting away with it. It's a problem. Anyway, now we know. It was incredible to hear.
When
Damon.
Yeah, Lance?
So a quick point of interest with Pinchas, okay, when he put that spear through Cosby and Zimri.
Yeah.
So Moshe had forgotten the halacha. Pinchas reminded him that they're liable for death sentence. And then he carried out the death sentence by sticking a spear in them. Now, that isn't even one of the four, that's not one of the four methods of execution. The stoning and burning, but there's not sticking a spear in somebody, So it's quite interesting that Moshe knew halachot. Well, he'd forgotten, but he was reminded. But it's interesting that they allowed that, because it's not one of the methods used for execution of someone
I
doing.
think that's a good point. I've actually never thought about it, to be honest. And I think Lance is bringing a very, very good point. That, firstly, Moshe was in such a state that he wasn't he wasn't even thinking clearly, because it just there was just out of control with this Cosby and Zimri thing to see them in the holy place, having cohabitation. So Pinchas shish kebabbed them. He's right, and it's not one of the 4 death penalties. There is an interesting source that Cosby and Zimri, had they waited for the right time, were destined to be together. For some reason, their progeny, I'm sure, had some sort of connection. But Lance, there is one interesting thing. I always thought Pinchas was a zealot, right? Because I thought, okay, why is he rewarded? You get people in any fanatic or religion that are prepared to kill somebody for disobeying. So what's the big deal? And then Rav Simcha Steinhaus said in the Parsha year, there was a war with the 10 tribes of Israel against the 2 tribes when it came time to doing personal sacrifices, not for the base midrash, but before the Mishkan, when it was public. People did their own sacrifices. And because they did it in a different way, these 2 tribes, they thought it was a form of idol worship, or certainly something not kosher. So the 8 tribes of Israel wanted to wipe out the 2 tribes, and it was Pinchas that said, listen, before we go and do this, let's actually find out what's really going on. And he was very cool-headed and said, let's avert any sort of drama. And that's why Pinchas was rewarded, because he wasn't rash. If he just did what his nature told him to do and react with a certain amount of alacrity because his nature was impulsive, there's no reward for that. So this proves that he went against his nature for Hashem. And then in the same shir, Rav Simcha Steinhal mentioned that the Jewish women were not prepared to give up their jewelry for the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf, but when it comes to the Mishkan, they gave generously, meaning that they overcame their nature of generosity when it was negativity and they didn't want to be part of it, and they were very generous when it came for the right reason. So this year was brought about the fact that there's reward specifically for going against your nature when it's hard to do the right thing for Hashem, whatever that nature is.
Got a question.
Yeah.
When they say he has to acknowledge the punishment, does he just have to hear it, or does he have to understand it?
Well, you see, this is the problem, is because who's going to acknowledge it? He's just going to go ahead and kill the person. So, that in itself is a whole discussion in Sanhedrin. Is acknowledging just hearing it? Is he an imbecile? Is he got mental illnesses? There's a myriad of considerations. And they're doing for Daf Yomi at the moment, Sanhedrin, it's part of it. But the bottom line is, even if the Beis Din doesn't give him the death penalty, because there's no hazroah, there's no warning, and there's maybe not 2 witnesses or whatever the case may be, they certainly give him the barley treatment, and that's not an excellent way to die. So it's solved. They just let it go indirectly. Because do you know, for Groma, indirect murder, you're not put to death. Like if you tie somebody up and wait for the tide to come in, you're not put to death. The tide killed them. So barley treatment is also indirect. No, don't worry, we never killed you. We gave you barley and then you needed something to drink, so we helped you. Boom, boom, bam.
Yeah, I mean, I want my supper rather be like steak and eggs and barley. Thanks.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. So, all right, guys, we'll get together on. Do you guys want to do a Sunday, or do you want to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? You guys pick.
Then this Monday I can't do it because I'm going to the tax authority. I'm busy during Monday.
Yeah,
So
that would make
Sunday
me lose my appetite too.
on the
So,
Sunday.
all right, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and
From the
Thursday.
following week. Yeah, from the following week, I don't mind doing it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and having the weekend.
Yeah, I would vote for Monday to Thursday rather, if Arthur can always make it.
All right,
Actually,
so
we probably can Monday because I should be out of there. I'm going to them at 3 o'clock.
all right, so
at the
should we
place in
give Sunday a
Jerusalem.
miss?
Be
You
out by
guys
5.
can do it the weekend. I can
Yeah,
see you all hammered.
Yeah.
All right,
We'll skip the weekend from Monday.
we'll do it from
Okay.
Monday. Guys,
Well, while we at it, why don't we just
Okay.
skip the whole of the whole of February?
that's February or January?
How about no? I was going to say the whole day.
January. I don't know. You were just throwing out offers. I was just thinking if there was Anybody else keen on that, because people are quite keen on missing out the weekend now. So I thought maybe there'll be takers on the month.
Well, we can always take a day break and come back in February 26th.
Sure.
2026.
We can just start next month.
Yeah, well,
Next month is Monday, Sunday or Monday. Till next month. No panic.
I'm posting this on. I am your student, bro.
all right, guys, before my brain melts from all the stupidity, I wish you a good
Listen,
Sunday.
sorry, what's the final decision? Are we doing it Sunday or not? What's the story?
Monday.
No, Monday.
Okay.
Monday to Thursday.
Oh,
Then you have
not
a proper
Sunday.
weekend.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do prefer. I prefer that. Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks a lot. Appreciate
Ciao,
it. That's
guys.
much better.